10-year-old Anichka had been warned about the man who resided on the 4th floor, directly above them. Her mother had explicitly forbidden any interaction with Andrei Ivanovich, a 40-something bachelor with a noticeable protruding belly who invariably dressed in the same attire. A green sweater, worn gray jeans, and round-lensed spectacles that magnified his blue eyes to an unsettling degree, reminiscent of an owl's gaze. Being unusually perceptive for her age, the young girl had connected the unexpected arrival of several stern-faced men with "police" emblazoned on their jackets at the upstairs neighbor's apartment with her mother's stern warning issued the very next day. From fragments of conversations overheard between her parents, Anichka understood that law enforcement had questioned the neighbor regarding a missing boy from her school. Apparently, an anonymous source had reported to the local police department about a suspicious individual who might be connected to the case. The man had reportedly been spotted frequently near the cemetery, where someone had recently begun disturbing graves. Despite thorough investigation, the officers discovered nothing incriminating in Andrei Ivanovich's residence. Nevertheless, their visit had stirred the entire building, promptly generating rumors fueled by vivid human imagination. Even the subsequent news that the missing child had perished in an accident at an abandoned hospital, falling from a rusted ladder while climbing to the roof with friends, failed to quell the gossip. Although the body was never recovered, the police, seemingly satisfied with this explanation, hastily closed the investigation. Personally, Anichka perceived no threat from Andrei Ivanovich. He always greeted her amiably, spoke with a gentle, pleasant voice, and occasionally offered her candy. Still, she dutifully followed her mother's directive with characteristic obedience. The child would never have anticipated that her mother would eventually send her to seek refreshments from the very neighbor she had once been cautioned to avoid. This unexpected development occurred several months after her father had supposedly departed on a lengthy business trip. Anichka clearly remembered returning from school that day to find her mother sobbing in the kitchen, clutching a transparent glass filled with amber liquid. "Daughter, your father won't be coming home from work today," her parent had managed between suppressed sobs. "He's gone on an extended business trip to the north. We don't know when he'll return." This puzzled the child. She knew her father worked in a mine on the outskirts of town and had never previously traveled for business, especially not for extended periods. The mystery of her father's sudden departure was inadvertently solved that evening when Anichka, staying up late watching television, caught the evening news reporting a gas leak at the very mine where her father worked. The realization that her father would never again return home, never squeeze her shoulders before bedtime or kiss her forehead while wishing her good night, was unbearable. Consequently, Anichka convinced herself that her mother's explanation about the business trip was absolute truth. From that point forward, the quality of the young girl's life deteriorated rapidly. She began noticing the glass of amber liquid in her mother's hand almost every evening. Soon, the amber liquid was replaced by a clear substance, and the glass became an inseparable accessory of her mother's existence. Anichka frequently observed small empty bottles from various pharmaceutical lotions, which her mother had suddenly developed an interest in. The woman grew irritable, ceased cooking meals, and quickly transitioned to inexpensive ready-made foods that required only microwave heating. Anichka, who had previously enjoyed conversing with her mother on various topics, began genuinely fearing the woman, who seemed to achieve a relatively pleasant mood only after consuming a specific quantity of her favorite lotions. Unexpectedly, Anichka's mother initiated contact with the upstairs neighbor, which genuinely shocked the girl. However, she soon comprehended the reason behind this newfound amenability toward the man whom the entire building avoided. He supplied the woman with those specific cosmetic products derived from pepper and hawthorn. "Daughter, why aren't we preparing for the celebration?" The mother staggered rather than walked into the room. It was New Year's Eve, December 31st. School classes had concluded until mid-January, So the girl had spent the entire day in her bedroom reading books about a boy who discovered his ability to manipulate a magic wand according to his will. This question simultaneously surprised and delighted the child, who hadn't dared hope that their deteriorating family would observe the new year, especially since her birthday the previous month had passed without acknowledgement from her mother. "Are we celebrating New Year, S?" she quietly inquired, as if afraid to jinx her fortune. Of course, her mother nodded. "I'll prepare a festive dinner. There's still time. Meanwhile, you should visit Andrei Ivanovich upstairs." "Andrei Ivanovich? But you once told me to stay away from him." "What nonsense. He's an excellent neighbor." "All those rumors? Absurd. Now go quickly. He should provide you with treats for mommy." Her enthusiasm diminished somewhat, as she suspected what these treats entailed. However, the joy of learning that amid her increasingly unhappy existence there would be a celebration overshadowed all other emotions. The girl prepared swiftly, already anticipating delicious food and the scent of tangerines that she strongly associated with New Year's festivities. Upon climbing the stairs to the upper floor, she gently pressed the doorbell button. The wooden door painted green opened almost immediately. On the threshold stood their neighbor, dressed in his invariable outfit: sweater, jeans, glasses. "Hello, Anya." His owlish face spread into a smile, giving him a somewhat comical expression. "They arrived at the perfect moment. The dolls and I are enjoying tea with bird's milk candy. Would you like to join us?" The statement about Andrei Ivanovich drinking tea with dolls didn't surprise Anya in the slightest. One rumor that had spread after the police visit, like smoke across a windless sky, concerned the strange attraction of this solitary adult male to dolls, which he allegedly crafted himself. People claimed he enjoyed arranging them before the television to watch cartoons together, reading books aloud to them, and even singing children's songs. No one knew exactly how neighbors had learned about such habits of a man who, despite his outward friendliness and benevolence, never shared details of his personal life. "My mother sent me to you for some refreshments," she said, avoiding eye contact with her neighbor. "She's probably waiting for me at home." "Ah, that," the man responded. "Certainly, I'll provide everything. But surely you wouldn't refuse to come in and have tea with us? I am confident your mother won't be angry, and you've likely been deprived of delicious treats for quite some time." Here, the man had guessed correctly. She truly hadn't consumed tasty food, particularly sweets, since her mother had developed her fascination with lotions. The bird's milk candies that the neighbor used to entice Anya were indeed her favorites. All right, the girl was surprised to hear her own agreement. It seemed as though control of her voice had been commandeered by her stomach, which sensed an opportunity to indulge in sweets. "Then, please come in," the man said, opening the door wider and gesturing for Anya to enter. After a moment's hesitation, she crossed the threshold of the apartment. Finding herself in a rather well-lit entryway, the child detected a barely perceptible yet familiar odor. The exact same slightly sour aroma emanated from her mother following her rituals with the lotions. "Go through to the living room," Andrei Ivanovich instructed pleasantly, indicating a door ahead. "I'll just go to the kitchen to get you a mug." The neighbor glided to the right. Glancing after him, Anya observed a small kitchenware. Near the stove, stood some motionless figure draped in what appeared to be rags. Andrei Ivanovich approached the figure and cheerfully announced, "Put on some more water to heat, we have a guest." He then opened a cabinet above the sink and extracted a mug. "Hello," Anya greeted, surprised by the presence of another person in the apartment of a neighbor widely considered to be a confirmed solitary dweller. However, the figure remained completely still, continuing to stand rooted in place as if planted there. Andrei Ivanovich turned around quickly. "Anichka, let's go to the living room." He displayed the mug retrieved from the cabinet to her. "And you," he addressed the figure, "I'll reprimand you later for your inhospitality." Gently taking the girl by the shoulder, The man guided her down the corridor toward the living room, from which television sounds emanated. "Pay no attention," he explained. "Anichka experiences certain difficulties with perceiving reality." "Is that your wife?" Anya inquired, surprised. "No, what are you thinking?" The neighbor laughed. "That's my creation. Zana is my doll," he added upon seeing his guest's bewildered expression. Anya glanced sideways at Andrei Ivanovich, fully expecting to see a smile on his face. The answer is surely some kind of joke, she told herself. "Here we are," the apartment owner announced as he entered the living room with Anya. The room's walls were covered with old, somewhat shabby wallpaper. A green carpet hung on one wall directly above a sagging sofa, near which stood a table with refreshments and a small teapot. On a worn cabinet opposite the table sat an old bulbous television displaying Soviet-era cartoons. But it wasn't the sight of an adult man watching cartoons that astonished Anya. Far more startling were three figures with human features sitting motionlessly at the table. Before each one stood a mug of steaming tea and saucers with untouched candies. The dolls were dressed in old, threadbare clothing. It seemed as though the dollmaker had utilized whatever he could find in his bachelor's wardrobe as attire for his creations. However, despite this apparent carelessness on the dollmaker's part, one couldn't help but notice the faces of the dolls seated at the table, which were crafted at the highest level, not inferior in quality to the finest works in Madame Tussaud's museums. "Let me introduce you. This is Anya." Andrei Ivanovich presented his guest to the silent, immobile company. "Anya, these are Anton, Nikita, and Klim." The apartment owner pointed to the dolls from left to right in succession. "Sit over there." The man nodded toward the sofa where the doll whom Andrei Ivanovich had called Klim was seated, "and help yourself." Anya slowly approached the table, noting that the scent of medicinal lotions had become particularly strong. As the girl carefully sat at the edge of the sofa, trying to maintain as much distance as possible from the strange dolls, she thought she saw Klim slightly move his hand resting on the table. The arm, which was visible beneath the rolled-up shirt sleeve, was almost completely covered, leaving only the fingertips exposed, dark and somewhat greenish in color. "I must be imagining things," Anya decided. Despite the sense of unreality permeating the situation, she felt more intrigued than frightened, perhaps due to the neighbor's good-natured behavior. He didn't seem frightening at all. If only it weren't for that smell. "We were watching Winnie the Pooh," said Andrei Ivanovich, pouring tea for his guest. "We really enjoy the song from it." From the right came a soft mumble. Anya turned her head sharply, but beside her sat the same lifeless doll, whose sewn lips on its waxy face had somehow slightly risen. "What is happening to me today? All sorts of nonsense," Anya scolded herself. "They just dolls. Why do you like dolls?" Anya blurted out the question that had been bothering her. "You, an adult." Andrei Ivanovich froze, not reaching his place at the head of the table. Turning slowly, he quietly uttered in a constricted voice, "You should help yourself to the candies." Anya needed no encouragement, restraining herself from devouring the entire basket of her favorite bird's milk candies positioned in the center of the table. The girl began carefully taking one candy at a time, before eventually abandoning pretense and extracting multiple pieces at once. "No one has ever asked me why I love them before. People have called me childish, abnormal, but no one has asked why I make them. You, Anichka, are the first." He removed his glasses, wiped the lenses, and put them back on. "Do you really want to know the reason for my fascination?" In truth, her curiosity had been relegated to second place behind the feast she had arranged for herself. However, seeing that the topic was important to the man, she nodded affirmatively, purely out of politeness. "This story is rather lengthy, so I'll fetch some more hot water to refill your tea while I tell it. I began to develop an interest in sewing dolls during my adolescence," Andrei Ivanovich continued. He had gone to the kitchen, returned with a kettle full of boiling water, and now sat before Anya, who had gorged herself on candies and was beginning to feel intensely drowsy. Father believed this hobby was unworthy of a boy and attempted to instill in me an appreciation for more suitable activities. In his mind, these activities were intertwined with concepts of masculinity, sports, hunting, fishing, and similar pursuits. I, however, found pleasure in crafting objects remarkably reminiscent of human beings. During these creative moments, I experienced a sensation of possessing a fragment of divine power, which compelled me to continue fashioning my dolls in secrecy from my father, who believed he had successfully overcome my childish tendencies. With time, I recognized that my passion, which had evolved beyond a simple hobby, was perceived by most of society in the same manner as my father viewed it. A man who creates dolls in his leisure hours is considered, at best, peculiar, and at worst, dangerous. Consequently, neither colleagues nor acquaintances, of whom I had very few, were aware that during evening hours, I experienced myself as a creator, albeit of modest caliber. Nevertheless, even in my most ambitious fantasies, I couldn't have envisioned how my life would transform. The incident occurred several years ago. I encountered youths who appeared not much older than yourself, approximately 11 years of age, siblings of opposite gender. I won't burden you with unnecessary details of that encounter, but during our acquaintance, I discovered that these children, Slava and Svetozar, had existed for multiple centuries. Their immortality stemmed from a clandestine ritual performed by an order firmly convinced that their leader was a deity who had lost its power. These young individuals informed me about ancient practices, even more ancient than themselves, concerning soul transference, referenced in Sumerian texts. According to their assertions, the soul is a substance contained within one of the human body's organs, bestowing life upon its vessel and departing when the vessel loses certain physical integrity. Thus, life persists within a human until their internal organs function properly. Various injuries, illnesses, and other adversities can only claim human life because they alter the organism's form. The siblings directed me toward specific scholarly works on this subject. The authors of these treatises were dismissed by conventional society as either mentally unstable or charlatans. This reaction is hardly surprising, since limited individuals, who unfortunately constitute the majority, attempt to discredit those who seek to expand reality's boundaries, in a pitiful effort to preserve their worldview intact. I examined numerous materials. Due to my former profession as an archaeologist, I had access to unique historical sources. Among these were ancient Egyptian tablets, which revealed that priests of that era essentially never changed. If a priest perished from age or other causes, one of his organs, functioning as a specialized accumulator, would be transplanted into another person, typically a slave. Subsequently, the priest would continue serving his numerous deities. The knowledge contained in these tablets was guarded with tremendous secrecy, accessible only to a limited number of individuals, transmitted to new people exclusively in cases of extreme necessity. When Christianity emerged on the stage of world history, these practices were actively combated. Adherents of the new religion justified their opposition by claiming such rituals were sacrilegious, as only God possessed the right to bestow life. Those with secret knowledge were ridiculed, denounced as heretics by the church, and opposed through every available means. Eventually, this exceptional knowledge was lost in history's grinding mechanisms, and it seemed humanity would never recover this loss. But as you can see, fate possesses a deeply ironic nature, and as the one destined to restore this knowledge, it selected me, a man who spends his free time creating dolls. This narrative, which would make an adult uneasy and uncomfortable, fascinated her greatly. Perhaps if she were somewhat older, she wouldn't have believed what her neighbor said, but children, lacking extensive life experience, can easily accept fantastic concepts. Furthermore, Andrei Ivanovich's account made her feel like the protagonist of an extraordinary story, similar to those in her favorite books about a boy who suddenly discovers his magical abilities. "So all these dolls are alive?" she asked. "Not all," Andrei Ivanovich replied with a melancholy smile. Creating a doll maximally resembling a human body is extremely challenging. One must consider countless details. I certainly strive to find the highest quality materials for my dolls, treating them with a special solution. You can probably detect that scent, after which I combine different materials together. In some areas I stuff the doll with rags, cover them with skin, to ultimately achieve a good specimen with appropriate forms, but the result isn't always satisfactory. For instance, part of the material I used to create Klim was found near an abandoned hospital. Afterward, I added missing elements from another source. I rendered what remained of the face somewhat acceptable using wax and glue. Klim can legitimately be called alive. Anton and Nikita, unfortunately, the man sighed heavily, lacked the spark of life. What about the one I saw in the kitchen? Zana? Oh, she's quite alive. The problem is merely that the primary portion of her material, during life, suffered greatly from cruel treatment. The manner in which people perish seemingly leaves a certain imprint on their soul, affecting them during their second chance. That's why she's so fearful. You said, perish. What does that mean? Is the material you use? The perceptive girl inquired. What an intelligent child, Andrei Ivanovich exclaimed admiringly. Yes, exactly what you rethinking. I must risk visiting various locations attempting to find superior material. What I obtain from the local cemetery isn't of the best quality. Incidentally, Anton and Nikita are made from precisely such inferior material. Perhaps that's the reason for my failure. I want to leave, Anna whispered. She had completely lost interest in the story as it revealed repulsive, vile details that made her feel like a character in a terrifying horror film. What a pity, Andrei Ivanovich expressed disappointment. But since they come to visit, I must show you my finest creation. With these words, he grasped the girl's hand and pulled her toward the corridor. Once there, the man, dragging Anichka behind him, moved toward a closed door at the corridor's end, beneath which, despite the sunny day, not a single ray of light penetrated. It appeared as if the room either had no windows or was shrouded with heavy drapes. Approaching the room, the girl detected another odor mingling with the tangy scent Andrei Ivanovich used to treat his dolls. It resembled the smell that had permeated her apartment a few weeks prior, after her mother inexplicably decided to roast a piece of pork that had been stored in the freezer for an indeterminate period. Her mother, barely able to stand by midday, had produced a dish that was, to put it mildly, subpar. The aroma of charred pork had lingered throughout the apartment for several days afterward. Now Anya was detecting precisely this odor, or something remarkably similar. I named him Mark. He avoids sunlight, so I must keep him in darkness. I believe it reminds him of the flames in which Mark perished in his previous existence, the man explained as he grasped the doorknob and began to turn it. What's behind the door? The girl inquired, her voice trembling with fear. A masterpiece. Forgive my boastfulness, chuckled the neighbor. However, you'll soon witness this yourself. With those words, the man opened the door, propelling the girl forward. Initially, she perceived the room, where the odor of burned flesh was nauseating, as empty. Due to the prevailing darkness filled with vague silhouettes, she didn't immediately notice the hunched figure seated on the floor against the wall opposite the entrance. Andrei Ivanovich approached the light switch and gently clicked it, bathing the space in warm illumination. The figure, which had been sitting on the floor until that moment, abruptly jumped up and darted toward Anya and Andrei Ivanovich. However, approximately midway across the room, it suddenly halted, taking a couple of backward steps from momentum, as if restrained by some unseen force. I am obliged to keep him tethered, Andrei Ivanovich stated. He constantly strives to escape somewhere. I suspect he's attempting to return home. The brain of this material was minimally damaged, so memories should have been preserved. Anya didn't register what her neighbor was saying. Before her stood a horrifying, grotesque human facsimile. It was a contorted figure clothed in remnants of charred work overalls. its face resembling a rubber mask with crude incisions for eyes, nose, and mouth, as if fashioned by an unskilled hand. Unfortunately, the skin of this material was almost completely incinerated. However, everything else, with certain exceptions, remained intact. Therefore, my task was primarily to cover the doll with rubber to achieve the desired form. The girl didn't hear her hospitable neighbor. She couldn't divert her gaze from the doll, which at that moment opened its mouth and emitted a loud moan. Speech currently eludes him, but I am hopeful that eventually he'll begin to talk, Andrei Ivanovich remarked matter-of-factly. Well then, isn't this a masterpiece? In the duty section of the police department, minimally decorated for the new year with past year paper garlands and snowflakes, a telephone rang, rousing the operational duty officer from the realm of Morpheus, having just begun to doze off. I am listening, he growled discontentedly. Not only had he been assigned a New Year's shift, but he couldn't even get proper rest. I know who's been desecrating graves, a child's voice quietly articulated on the other end of the line. While throughout the rest of the city people were launching fireworks and rockets, illuminating surrounding buildings with multicolored lights, in her courtyard an intense silence prevailed. The New Year's night was punctuated by the red and blue flashes of police vehicle lights, which occupied all available space in front of the entrance where officers were carrying out stretchers bearing human-shaped figures. Can you imagine? He crafted dolls from corpses. Anya overheard an excited female whisper behind her. And we resided in the same building as this maniac. Police had already conducted a search at his place, but initially they suspected nothing. Well, could anyone possibly have thought to verify what material they were made from? The second voice, belonging to a man, responded, "From what I understand, someone tipped off the police. So they came specifically to examine these dolls. Plus, he treated them with something that eliminated decomposition odors." The girl stood amid the crowd that had emerged into the courtyard as soon as multiple police sirens began wailing. When she had returned home from Andrei Ivanovich's, her mother was already in a deep alcohol-induced slumber and consequently hadn't heard the police vehicle's arrival. Anya had decided to personally confirm that her neighbor, along with his dreadful creations, would be taken away by the authorities. Only then could she find peace. After minimal deliberation, she dressed and ventured outside, joining the throng of onlookers. The Dollmaker was the last to be escorted out. Anya was astonished by how his appearance had transformed. Andrei Ivanovich walked hunched over, gazing only at the ground beneath him. He appeared diminutive, as if his internal strength, nourished by some higher ideal, had abruptly abandoned the man once it became evident that everything was finished. Vasily asserts, continued the same female voice, that he witnessed a certain man dashing out of the apartment during the search. In the darkness, he couldn't discern him clearly. This coincided precisely with the moment when police sirens began to wail. I believe it could be the maniac's accomplice. On rigid legs, Anya navigated through the crowd and proceeded toward the entrance. She heard the door of the police UAZ vehicle, into which Andrei Ivanovich had been placed, slam shut, followed by the strained coughing of the old automobile's engine. Opening the entrance door, the girl began ascending to her floor, noting a strong acidic odor permeating the stairwell. Near her apartment door, it mingled with another scent, that of burned pork. Slowly opening the door, Anya detachedly considered that her mother had perhaps decided to prepare a festive dinner after all, and judging by the smell, had failed in her attempt. It would take several days for the odor to dissipate again. A figure stood in the dark corridor of the apartment. The red and blue lights from outside illuminated the rubber that encased the face of the uninvited guest. "Daughter," the doll rasped with difficulty.